From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and All India Radio, this is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Isabelle Westbury for the BBC in Oxford, where I'm revelling in the newfound appreciation for women in sport after England's Lionesses were crowned European football champions just last weekend. And with the Commonwealth Games in full flow and the 100 having kicked off again for a new season, women's cricket is now firmly back in the spotlight.
Lovely to see you, Izzy. It's Jim Maxwell for the ABC in Sydney, and we've been delighting in the middle of the night with the coverage of the Commonwealth Games and the performance of the Australian women in particular in the swimming pool, although the cricketers look as though they're going to be playing in a final the way things have shaped up after that squeaky game against India. So a lot to look forward to, but not much happening locally because where I am in Sydney, it's still raining and windy and a bit chilly. But I'm sure Charu will be able to warm us all up from wherever he is.
Well, thanks, Jim. Hi, this is Charu Sharma for All India Radio. I'd love to warm you guys up. I suppose it's warm enough in Mumbai, but we're right in the middle of the monsoon. So you don't talk about rain to us in India, Jim. It's bucketing down in every city. In Bangalore, particularly, we're all flooded. But I'm in Mumbai, in fact, at the well-appointed Trident at Nariman Point, the Oberoi Hotel. And I'm looking down on what's called the Queen's Necklace, the Bay Area here in Mumbai. Well, we all had a wonderful time. I'm here now for the Pro Kabaddi League auctions for season 9. So that's going to be very interesting tomorrow and day after. And thereafter, I'll go back to Bangalore for what's the now Maharaja Trophy, the new avatar of the Karnataka Premier League. But of course, all eyes, as far as I'm concerned, on the Commonwealth, where the Indian women are doing rather well. They had that narrow loss to Australia, but it does look like they're good material for the final. And of course, the Indian boys are on the West Indies, but they're not facing too much trouble, are they?
Well, while Australia are at the Commonwealth Games alongside England and India, so are another team that we're going to talk about now, Pakistan women. On the 28th of January, 1997, the Pakistan women's team played their first ever international cricket match. 25 years later, present day, they have made history, taking part in women's cricket's first appearance at the Commonwealth Games. It's been a long and hard-fought journey for female cricketers in Pakistan as they battled against the traditions and politics of society for a right to play the sport. And here to tell us all about it, I'm delighted to say, is Aayush Puthran, the author of a new book on the subject. Aayush, welcome to Stumped. Your book is called Unveiling Jazbaa. Tell us, what is the meaning behind that phrase and why have you called it that?
Hi, Izzy. So the title Unveiling Jazbaa. Now, Jazbaa is an Urdu word. Basically, there's no English equivalent. It's sort of a cocktail of passion, spirit, feelings, emotions. And in a way, even though it's used widely in India and Pakistan, in Pakistan, that becomes the reason for everything, Jazbaa. It's sort of anything that defies logic and you want to explain that purely in cricketing terms, it's used widely even for men's cricket team. So if you want to know why Pakistan played poorly one day, the next day they just turned up and put up the most sensational performance, what's the reason behind it? It's Jazbaa. So Jazbaa is used in a very day-to-day life for Pakistan. And in that sense, this unveiling Jazbaa is about, the story itself is about stepping out, the power of stepping out, and how many barriers they have broken because of this passion for cricket, the barriers, the cultural barriers, the social barriers, the political, the financial barriers, to be able to achieve all that they have. So Unveiling Jazbaa is sort of a metaphor for that act, the story itself of Pakistan women's cricket.
Amazing. I think I've already found my new favourite word. Brilliant, Jazbaa. Now, 86 women have represented Pakistan in the last 25 years. And of course, all of their stories are varied and different, and you see that in the book. But just tell us a bit about some of the shared struggles that they've overcome in order to just play cricket, let alone represent Pakistan.
Shared struggles begins with the house itself. The moment that for a lot of women to say to their family members that I want to play cricket, that is the first barrier. Because if you see, a lot of these women have played cricket in secrecy. I'll tell you the story of Nahida Khan, for example. She made her debut in 2009. Until 2017, she was a regular member for all these 8 years for Pakistan national team. But she couldn't tell this to her neighbors that she's the person who's playing for Pakistan. So first, it begins with acceptance at home. Then it begins with the financial struggles. And then you go to a lot of these issues where majority of Pakistan stays in rural areas, where you don't have great connectivity, great transport, you don't have facilities to play cricket. Even as late as 2020, Diana Beg, she was playing in secrecy in Lahore because in Gilgit-Baltistan, where she comes from, you don't have cricketing facilities. So she has to go down to Lahore in that campus where you're not allowed to play. She has to play in secrecy. Just for women to go out and play was a hindrance. You're not allowed. You're banned from performing publicly, whether it's in music, it's in dance, it's in theater, it's in cricket or any sport for that matter. In 2005, women were beaten up for running on the streets. So these are the kind of struggles you will find for a lot of girls to be playing cricket for Pakistan.
Yes, you mentioned the name Khan there. Were you referring to Shazia and Shameen Khan, who you focused on in the early part of the book? Is that the reference point? And maybe you could elaborate a bit more on their contribution.
Shazia and Sharmeen came from Karachi and they've studied in Lahore. They were extremely intense, passionate, ambitious women. They believed in the 1980s, possibly a lot of women from Pakistan claim that that was the worst time to be a woman in Pakistan. They were in UK studying at that time and they were ambitious enough to believe that they can be the world's greatest cricketers. They believed they were good enough to play for UK as well, which as citizens of Pakistan, they weren't allowed. They took on the entire systems in Pakistan, whether it was these organizations, these strong organizations politically strengthened with the financial muscles. And if that meant that they will have to pay everything out of their pockets, they were willing to do that. They were willing to achieve the larger goal at the cost of whatever comes along the way. They had to battle institutions altogether. They had to escape from Pakistan to play the first ever World Cup in India, because they were put on an exit control list, which is a list that is put for hardened criminals to not leave the country. The Pakistani women's team was put on that list. So, okay, there was a bit of cricket happening within the elite circles of Pakistan, in Lahore especially. But without them, a Pakistan national team either wouldn't have existed till now or would have been at least a minimum of 10 years behind. So they were basically the founding mothers of Pakistan cricket, if that's a word.
Ayush, hi, this is Charu Sharma, currently in Mumbai, but I also live in Bangalore, where I believe you are today. You mentioned a lot about the 80s and 90s when women's cricket in Pakistan was quite veiled, difficult. How much has that changed currently? And is there still, you think, very strong opposition to girls taking up the game?
If you play cricket, okay, if you're in the top 15, 20, there are certain financial rewards, because financial rewards are a massive incentive for parents to let their daughters play. So if there are no financial rewards, there is something called as tanning of skin that becomes an issue. There is something called as strong arms that becomes an issue, purely from a societal perspective. And you can see even last year, somebody like Nida Dar, who was the main player for Pakistan's Asian Games gold medal, she was mocked for having strong arms, or the way she dresses, or the kind of haircut she has. And this mocking came from a cricketer like Abdul Razak, who knows the demands of the game. Okay, it was a comedy show. He tried to be funny. And it was stated right there because there were people in the audience who found it funny. They laughed along with him. So in that sense, yes, there's a lot of shame that gets attached. Okay, if you've played for Pakistan, maybe that shame won't be there. But what if you don't make it to the top level and become an elite athlete? So the issues are so many. So of course, there are barriers in that sense. But what has definitely changed is that parents are coming with their daughters. So there is definitely a change, but a significant improvement is required from a lot of sense, because there is very little incentive to go and play for Pakistan.
Ayush, talking about parents coming with their daughters, one parent in particular is the Pakistan captain Bismah Maroof, who's been one of the players of the Commonwealth Games and of the World Cup earlier this year. She joined us, in fact, on Stumped after she returned to cricket following the birth of her daughter, Fatima, who's become a bit of a star in herself. How much has Bismah and Fatima been a trailblazer for Pakistan's women's cricketers, showing that you can have both a family life as a wife and a mother, but also very successfully play international cricket?
She is an absolute star. It cannot be overstated how significant that move is And every time we talk about Bismah Maroof, we need to talk about Nayan Abdi. Because before Bismah Maroof, there was another cricketer, Nayan Abdi, who tried to do something similar without the kind of support, without the kind of backing that Bismah had. And she failed, fair enough. She failed at the last stop, trying to play cricket, be next to a toddler, and also be alongside a husband who had an ankle sprain eventually when she went for the Nationals. But in a way, she inspired Bismah Maroof. That is the story of Pakistan cricket. It is a chain reaction. So it is one person inspiring the other. Anyone having a kid and trying to, especially mothers, trying to concentrate on their professional life will be viewed as selfish in a very South Asian environment. So in that sense, yes, to make it possible, and because she's such a big figure, to make it acceptable to be there and show that this is possible, that they can go and play cricket and they're bringing laurels back home, giving hope to the next generation or the next lot of people coming through. Now, I'm not saying that Bismah will go on to become the greatest cricketer ever or something like that, but tomorrow, maybe there might be a brilliant cricketer whose career could have stopped because of marriage or childbirth or whatever. Now she's made room for those people to ensure that they have an uninterrupted career.
Ayush, that's absolutely fascinating. I think we could all sit here for hours on end talking about it, but I would certainly encourage all listeners to go and read the book Unveiling Jazbaa. Ayush, thank you very much for joining us on Stumped.
Stumped on the BBC World Service.
Every year, the best men's white ball cricketers in the world flock to India for one of the most lucrative paydays of their career. Indian Premier League franchises entice players from all over the globe with massive salaries for approximately 2 months of star-studded 2020 cricket. But what if those 2 months became 12? While the IPL itself wouldn't last any longer, Venki Mysore, the chief executive of IPL side Kolkata Knight Riders, has this week suggested that franchises may look to contract players for the full year. They would in return represent other teams which are owned by the same people as their IPL employers, but in different domestic leagues around the world. For example, Australia captain Pat Cummins may be contracted to represent the Kolkata Knight Riders in the IPL. And then he might also play for the Trinbago Knight Riders in the Caribbean Premier League, another team in the new South Africa T20 League, and so on and so forth. Jim, does that concern you at all? Does it feel like the IPL franchises interested in this are looking to dominate the global game?
Well, commercial reality will out in many ways, as we're seeing now, obviously, in the kibosh that's going on between Greg Norman's LIV and the PGA Tour in golf. But you would hope that most of the people who play cricket at the highest level would want to play for their country first and the rest on the side. But the money is so attractive, there's going to be a conflict. Although, interestingly, the other day when Warner's name came up in Australian cricket about going off to Dubai for $2.1 million US over 3 years, perhaps he'll pick up a window of some sort and play in the BBL. So it's going to be tricky, as we're already seeing with the scheduling, and how much international cricket suffers as a result remains to be seen. And it'd be interesting to hear from Charu on what he thinks the BCCI's position is going to be, because they've backed international cricket. They're playing test cricket regularly and white ball tournaments. How this all marries up is a concern at the moment. What do you reckon, Charu?
Jim, we're opening up a very large can here. I would like to think that their attention really is on cementing the IPL as the world's biggest cricket tournament. I don't think they're thinking beyond that. And it does seem to me that regardless of the pressure of other leagues, I don't think the BCCI is going to relent and allow Indian players anywhere else, because anything that takes the sheen away or the standard away from the IPL or allows other leagues to equal the standard is something that is not in the interest of the BCCI. So it's a little fanciful, I think, at this point of time. I don't think this 12-year contract is going to work for the bigger players, maybe for a couple of retired players, who knows, but they're less big once they retire, if you know what I mean. And you don't want 12-month contracted players who are not really essentially big stars playing elsewhere. So it's all a little complicated right now. And yes, you're right, Jim, as far as the Indian players are concerned, at least they mouth these words that they'd like to play for the country first, or more importantly, than leagues. But as we all know, only about 15, 18, 20 can play for the country. When there's a league going, there are as many as 200 players. So eventually, they have no choice but to also look at getting a place in the league, because at least that gives them a source of livelihood, because only very few really can go on to play for the country.
Charu, I think it's pretty obvious that this stands to make a few owners and business interests a lot of money should this 12-month contract go ahead. But what about the players? I mean, they could also, the select few, I guess, that are involved in this stand to make a lot of money. But would it also take away a bit of their power? Because at the moment, they're almost free agents. We had Dan Christian on Stumped, who spoke about the life of a freelance cricketer. You can, to an extent, if you are one of those lucrative ones, you can pick and choose. But these contracts will make them full-time employees and bound by the whims of those owners.
If you do want these long-term contracts, then you'll have to accept some sort of an annual fee, which may be a lot less than a collective fee across different leagues if you are selected. So it really is player to player. If you're at the end of your career and you're getting a long-term contract, I suspect most players will take it. But if you're at the height of your career, you expect good values individually from every league that you're allowed to play. And that might well exceed an annual income. But I do think most players would like to obviously be independent or be freelancers, because they keep getting the values depending on their performance. You don't want to be locked into a contract when you're playing a lot better and not getting remunerated for it because you're locked in.
Many, many developments that still need to come, but that's all we've got time for on this week's Stumped on All India Radio. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter. We are at BBC WS Sport and use the hashtag BBC Stumped. And check us out on YouTube too. Go to BBC World Service YouTube. My thanks to Charu Sharma, Jim Maxwell, and to all of you for listening. Speak to you soon.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.